Alaska really unique in this fight about energy independence? Because you guys have a very different perspective than I think folks in the other 49 states.
Yeah, well, thanks, Sean. So first of all, Alaska is probably the only state in the country in which it was required to collectivize all of its resources under the government. Because back in the 50s, they thought Alaska had too small of a population for an income tax or sales tax to be able to support the state's government. And so we are compelled by our Statehood Act and we're compelled by our Constitution to actually develop our resources. Our abundant oil, our abundant gas, timber, fish, gold, you name it. We have it all, and we're compelled by our admittance into the Union to do this. The irony is, we're now being shut down by our own government. We are an oil giant. We had 2 million barrels going through the pipeline back in 1990. We came online the same time the North Sea did in response to the oil embargoes, the oil shocks of the Arab oil embargoes. But again, what we're finding with this new administration, as opposed to the Trump administration was all about opportunity. All about opportunity. This administration is all about canceling everything, canceling oil plays, gas plays, mining plays, timber plays. And just at the very time we need all of the resources to make America independent, they're canceling it.
Harriet, when I think of Alaska, I think of ANWR drilling. When I think of Texas, same thing. What should people think about Wyoming when it comes to energy?
We're the largest coal producer in the nation. We have and it's clean coal. So one of the things that's interesting when you talk about energy independence, I went back and looked at the policy under the Obama administration, and they very clearly stated that there is no such thing as energy independence. That's something that gets the crowd excited, but that it's simply not going to happen. And then we have President Trump elected, and what happened? Energy independence. And what did that do? All we're seeing right now in terms of inflation in this country, that's policy. That is policy coming out, it's monetary policy coming out of Washington, D.C. It's energy policy coming out of Washington, D.C. You increase the cost of producing gasoline and coal, everything that we purchase is going to increase in cost, whether it is food or it is housing, no matter what it is. And so what we have is we have an administration that has gone to war with the citizens of this country, and everything they're doing is increasing the cost of energy and fuel, food, housing, all of it. And very bad policy from the standpoint of Washington, D.C. But what we're seeing internationally is also what's so scary. Everything that's happening right now on the international stage is also related to energy policy. What do we have? Germany becoming dependent or being dependent upon Russia for its energy, for its fuel, for its gas, for us to be able to heat our homes. Energy independence is national security. National security is energy security. And our current administration does not understand that.
Let me pick up on that, Governor, because Harriet's talking about national security. We all recall a famous line a few presidential cycles ago about how close Russia is to Alaska. Explain to me, you guys do have a very unique perspective on how close you are. How does what's happening in Ukraine affect the folks in Alaska, and how does this pertain to the debate and the discussion on energy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if folks realize that Alaska is actually owned by the Russians. We were purchased in 1867 by William Seward, Secretary of State, that was brought in under Abraham Lincoln. And it was purchased for $7.2 million. It's actually a pretty good deal for America. But we're literally 2.5 miles from each other. A small island called Little Diamond is Alaska. Big Diamond is Russian. It's 2.5 miles across the international date line. Mainland-wise, we're 50 miles apart. So we are by far the closest state to Russia. And we have flyover incursions by Russian military probably once a month, once every 2 months. So we're very close to the bear, as they say. And the interesting thing, Sean, is the Russians are producing massive amounts of oil and gas in the Arctic. And our own federal government is telling us in Alaska that we can't produce any more oil and gas in the Arctic.
So, I mean, literally, they're out there taking what we can be taking.
Literally, they're out there laughing all the way to the bank.
Yes, they are.
Because of our policies. We are enriching them, we are making them more powerful, we are jeopardizing our own national security, we're sending jobs overseas. And the one thing I think we're going to get into is the environmental concerns. They don't have the environmental regulations that the United States does. They don't have the environmental regulations that Alaska has. And so they're unencumbered by that. And again, if you produce here in America, as Harry was saying, if you produce here in America, if you produce in Alaska, you save the environment, you save jobs, you create wealth, and you drive down the cost of energy. We have approximately 24 billion barrels of oil left in the ground in Alaska, about 124 trillion cubic feet of gas in Alaska. That absolutely can drive down the cost of energy and make sure that we are energy independent. So we look out there, we see Russia, we see them producing, and we wonder why our own federal government is actually putting sanctions on states like Wyoming and Alaska.
You know, Harriet, the governor touched on the environmental. You mentioned clean coal. If you listen to the left, they'll talk about the environmental concerns. So expand on that a minute, because I think that it's interesting. I don't think that the full story gets told about why that's not an accurate statement, and especially when it comes to U.S. energy production versus, say, Russia. But expand on the cleanness and the environmental concerns that the left brings up.
Well, absolutely, and the irony is that what they want to do in terms of energy is something to require massive entire world. You've got with rare earth minerals, what the done in Africa, the mining that is done in China. In terms of environmental degradation, what we do with our coal in Wyoming, we're above. Export is hungry for our coal because they're building coal-fired power plants. Thank you. And as a result, we're getting left behind. And again, it comes back to that energy security and international security. And we can produce coal. We've been producing coal for decades, for hundreds of years. We're able to do it safely. We're able to do it clean. And the fact is that carbon is not the horrible constituent that so many people want to make it out to be. It's plant food. We are not in a situation where we have too much carbon. We've got this idea of global warming and climate change, and what it's really doing is it's making America very, very weak, and it's making our enemies very, very strong, because they're not willing to destroy their economies in their countries for pursuing this radical green environmental agenda.
So, Governor, I want to come about that because I didn't realize, it was funny, we had Congressman Mike Waltz on my show on Newsmax 6 p.m. every night. He'll be here all day, but at 6 o'clock I've got special permission from Matt. You can go back and watch. But it was interesting because Congressman Mike Waltz was talking about how dirty the Russian oil is.
Sure.
Versus, and I feel like that is missing from this discussion. That not only is Biden shutting down Keystone and preventing drilling in Anwar on federal lands, which hurts all the things that you just mentioned, the jobs and everything else, the wealth creation. But it's also not, it doesn't hold water when it comes to the environmental part of this.
No, not at all. So, for example, in Alaska, by state law, we decided not to flare our gas. So we don't flare our gas.
What does that mean?
Well, that's when you see you'll see flames coming out the top of a pipe that's venting gas out of the oil fields, burn it off. So in Russia, in their oil or gas field of Yamal, they have 1,500 wells that are flaring nonstop, 24 hours a day. The irony of, and this is what Harriet's talking about, is the irony is when you push this stuff overseas, you actually destroy the environment at an accelerated rate. If you do it here in America, you protect the environment. So there used to be a saying, the Russian engineers would come over and take a look at the Alaska pipeline when it was first built, and they'd ask, how much oil goes in it? And we would tell them how much goes in it, and they'd ask, how much comes out of it? And our people would look at them like, well, the same amount that goes in it. And the reason is because in Russia, you don't get the same amount of oil coming out of it because it's leaking throughout various parts of the pipeline that they've built. So the environmental regulations in Russia and across other countries are nothing compared to America, nothing compared to Alaska or Wyoming. And so for those folks that say we're going to save the environment by stopping it here in America, you're going to accelerate the destruction of the environment overseas. That's what's going to happen.
That's right.
So the thing that
What I would add to that is that it is our prosperity that allows us the luxury of protecting our environment. Go to a third world country and tell me how they protect their environment. We destroy our economy, we destroy our ability to save jobs, we destroy our truckers, we destroy our small businesses. We're not going to have the same prosperity to be able to protect the environment the way that we do. We are a first world country because of the laws that we have and because of our care for that, but really it comes down to one thing, and that is prosperity. And prosperity and national security are absolutely tied to energy independence and energy policy. And this administration is a disaster.
So let's talk about the policies behind that. Let's just start for a second on the Biden piece. What is the Biden administration doing specifically that is harming and making us energy independent again? Because I think it's interesting when we throw the terms around. We were energy, but I think there's a lot of interesting substance beneath that. So, Governor, I'll start with you. Like, what is driving? What policies are specifically driving that?
They're making it incredibly difficult to drill on federal land. So in Alaska, for example, 60% of our land is federal land. A lot of the oil and gas is located up in the federal land. They're making it incredibly difficult. Some of you folks have probably heard about ANWR. This is the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge in the northern part of the state of Alaska. What they call the coastal plain was set aside by Congress many, many years ago for the potential for drilling for oil. And under the Trump administration, once again, there was a tax law that was passed allowed drilling leases to be sold in ANWR. Those leases were sold, and all of a sudden, when the Biden administration comes in, they are doing everything they can to cancel those leases. This fine potentially has billions of barrels of oil as well. So that's an example. Offshore oil leases in Cook Inlet are being slowed down. The price of the leases are being raised to make it more difficult. So instead of enhancing opportunity, they're killing opportunity. Again, going to raise the cost of doing business here in the United States and in Alaska is just going to cause energy to cost more and make us rely more on our adversaries. The irony is this, Sean. Again, we can pump much more oil in Alaska, but because of the policies of the Biden administration, we're importing more and more oil from Russia, just a couple miles from America.
Harriet?
Well, and I would add to that, Wyoming is 48% of our surface estate is owned by the feds, and 65% of our mineral estate is owned by the feds. I grew up on a ranch outside of Fort Laramie, Wyoming. Our gasoline costs are one of the most important inputs that we have, as well as our electricity for running our center pivots and irrigating and things like that. Everything that we do is impacted by these terrible policies. And what I think it comes down to is it's a matter of control. Because all of this really is monetary policy. This is an affirmative policy by this administration to kowtow to the radical environmentalists. And what's really going to happen is the poorest among us are going to become poorer and the middle class is going to be hit the hardest. There is, really the purpose of government is to protect its citizens, to protect the freedoms that we have. Yet we have an administration that has truly gone to war with the average person in this country. They want your food prices to go up. They want your energy prices to go up. They want those kinds of things. We can talk about what they're doing with our education establishment, and there are so many areas that they're touching. And the reality is that every single thing that they've touched so far has been a disaster. And this is just one of the many areas. And eventually, you have to come to the conclusion that this isn't by accident. They're trying to fundamentally transform the United States of America, and we're not going to let them. We're going to stop them through policies like this, through working with Governor Dunleavy and pushing back against this idea that the federal government has the right to dictate how we develop our energy and how we use our energy.
It's real simple, Sean. This is part and parcel of a massive social engineering process that we're undergoing in this country right now. Whether it's, as Harriet said, whether it's schools, whether it's dividing this country along racial and ethnic lines, et cetera, et cetera. It's also about, in a way, making us poor, making us less secure. And it's all about policy as we start this conversation. It's all about policy. You've got to put the right people in place to make sure you have the right policy. If you don't, we're at an inflection point in the history of this country right now. If you don't, you're going to get more of what you're seeing now, and it's going to accelerate. So really, this is the time to really change this thing around and turn it around for good.
Let me ask you a question. If someone here at CPAC goes home, and they're having a discussion with their crazy aunt or uncle, who's like, the Biden administration, I read the Washington Post, and none of this is Biden's fault, it's still Trump's fault. I mean, we know how that plays out. what policies could you specifically point to and say, okay, if you did these 3 things, you could immediately, so if you're having that argument, what would you arm somebody with in terms of messaging points and say, just tell them that we can do this, this, and this? What are those 3 things that we should be doing that would make us more energy independent?
Well, first of all, making the lease process a lot easier, streamlining our studies and our permitting processes instead of making it 7 years and 12 years and 15 years, really shrinking that. Actually, what we should be doing now is declaring an energy emergency for this country so that we can flatten all this regulation right now, get drilling right now, oil, gas, you name it, right now. We can do that.
So I ask you a question though, in the state of Alaska, what's the percentage of people that say, I just heard what the governor said, I'm with him 100%?
The vast majority.
That's what I don't understand. The people of your state, and Harriet, I mean, I assume that's it's mind-boggling that you've got these folks, these leftists in Washington that are saying, we know better for Alaska.
Absolutely. I'll tell you something. So my wife is a CPAC Eskimo lady, born above the Arctic Circle, live in a small village. Her people on the North Slope, these are the folks that hunt whales, sit on the North Slope oil fields, the largest oil fields in North America. They want to drill. They want to drill because they know what energy does for them, and they know what the wealth does to transform their communities. And so this is a fight for the future of this country, not just my state, but the future of this country. What is this country going to look like? Are we going to deliberately, through social engineering policies, make this a poorer country, a weaker country? Or are we going to turn this around here in a few months to make sure that America is back on top again?
I absolutely agree. It is a matter of bureaucrats making legislative decisions about what we're going to do. So as you say, Washington, D.C., some egghead in Washington, D.C., is making a decision about what we're doing in Wyoming. And we have been very effective in terms of drilling for our oil and gas, doing it environmentally sound, the same with our coal, the same with uranium. We have all of these natural resources that we can be using to make our lives better. One of the things I'm so proud of coming from Wyoming is we make people's lives better. We heat your homes in the winter, we cool your homes in the summer, we put food on your table, we put a roof over your head, and we pave your highways. That's a lot to be proud of coming from the state of Wyoming. And I don't want to have to continuously be fighting someone in Washington, D.C. who is going to make the decision that, you know what, Harriet, we're not going to let you do that this year. We don't like that you're doing that. We are the most prosperous, the very best, the most incredible country on earth because of what we've been able to do with the freedom and the development and the opportunities we've had. We are incredibly, we have so much ingenuity in this country, and we have so many different ways of addressing whatever the problems are. And we happen to have an administration in place right now that is doing everything that it can to block our ability to pursue what we know is our natural God-given rights. And so it has been really crazy how much power has been stockpiled in Washington, D.C. We need to stop stockpiling power in Washington, D.C., and we need to stop sending all of their money because it's really fundamentally broken. And when you have an administration like this, it becomes so evident so quickly. I think that everybody in this room is probably stunned at how fast this happened. But that's also why I'm optimistic, because I know that we can fix it very quickly as well. Just unleash the ingenuity of the American people.
Just real quick, it's a tale of 2 administrations, and it couldn't be more stark. The previous administration was about opportunity and hope. Really was. This administration is about cancellation and trepidation. We don't know what the future holds under this administration. We have an idea, but the past administration was truly about opportunity and hope, and we got to get back to that opportunity and hope.
Totally agree. Let me ask you, it's hard to believe, considering what's happened in the last 12 months, but we're only in the first year of a 4-year Biden term. How concerned are you about, I mean, look, if you think about what's happened in 12 months, I'm really worried about the industry.
Yeah.
What does the industry look like at the end of 4 years? Because I think Harriet's got a great point. I think their goal is to try to figure out how to snuff it out as much as possible and then just build windmills.
It'll look like Venezuela. Venezuela was one of the richest countries on the face of the earth, has more oil than any other locale. Timber, gold, you name it. And because of poor policies, they've destroyed that country. That's what we're looking at unless we change things around. We're going to make ourselves weaker. We're not going to make ourselves stronger in this administration.
Well, and I would add to that, what was one of the very first things that Hugo Chavez did when he took power? He took control of the oil and gas companies.
That's it.
You have a government that takes control of your energy, they control your lives. Look at what is playing out right now in the Ukraine with Russia. What is the what are the folks in the European Union doing? What are they saying? They're scared to death to act because they are dependent upon Russia for their energy. And that's what has made for a very dangerous world. We have empowered by our policies with this administration and the Obama administration, which was also an absolute disaster in this area. What have we done? We have empowered the thugs of the world, and we have emasculated the countries that actually believe in freedom and in prosperity. So that is where we are. When you put people like Joe Biden in office and the people that he's brought with him, you make for a very dangerous world. But again, I'm optimistic because I know that America can fight back against that. Our eyes have been opened to transparency. We know what's happening. We can fight it. We're not going to become Venezuela.
It's simple, Sean. We have to make America great again.
And then the best part is, it's there, we've seen the blueprint, we know it works, and it makes common sense. And the other thing is, we know that none of their arguments hold waters. It creates jobs, it's good for our country, it's good for our national security, and it's better for the environment. So we just got to get out there and do our jobs. I'll let you guys do that. Anyway, thank you all very much. Really appreciate your time. Governor, Harriet, thank you.